Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, Gym Bros, Big Paul here today, and we are going to talk about everybody's favorite topic. That's training volume. We know that training volume is not your favorite topic. It's actually how much gear pros take in trend. But today, we're going to talk about training volume. I find training volume very interesting. It's a subject that people get themselves all twisted up in knots on. Should you do more volume? Should you do less volume? Should you do HIIT training? Yada, yada, yada. It's the debate that is old as time. Should you train like Dorian Yates? Or should you be a high-volume trainer like Jay Cutler? Which works better? Well, we're going to dig into training volume. I'm going to give you my thoughts on training volume, how you adjust training volume, and we're going to dig into all that in just 1 second. So I'll tell you guys, I have tried every style of training that you can imagine. I've done high volume, I've done low volume, I've done powerlifting style training, I've done bodybuilding training, I've done CrossFit style training, I've done it all. And for bodybuilding, what I have found to be the most effective is some sort of higher volume training. Now the question is, how much volume do you need to really do? And everybody likes to point out Dorian Yates. Well, Dorian Yates was a HIIT trainer. He did low volume. He did low frequency. Dorian was Mr. Olympia. Dorian was an outlier. If you look at the pro bodybuilders that are on the stage today, almost all of them use a higher volume style of training. And I'm going to explain to you why that is the case and what we can do or how we adjust volume and how volume plays into things and how Dorian was able to train the way he was able to train and some of the lower volume guys and how some guys can do higher volume and not as high intensity and still grow. So when we think about volume, there is a certain amount of volume that you can handle. We have to establish that there is a minimum effective volume for growth. Dorian Yates certainly figured that out. And there is a ratio here of volume to intensity that we have to factor in. So the lower the volume is, the higher intensity that your workouts have to be to create the sort of stimulus that is necessary to grow. The sets that you do have to be perfect. The sets that you do have to provide the proper stimulus to promote hypertrophy. So if you are going to train with lower volume, you need to generate a high amount of intensity, and you need to effectively target those muscles. If you go back and look at Dorian Yates' training, go back and watch his videos, Dorian had extremely clean form on everything, and Dorian trained balls out on everything. He didn't leave anything in the tank. Every set counted. I don't see many people in the gym that are able to generate that type of intensity. I just do not. They are far and few between. So now a lot of the modern bodybuilders now use more volume, much like they did in the 70s. Guys in the 70s used a ton of volume. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco Columbo, Frank Zane, all those guys used a ton of volume back then, and they looked just fine. Those guys got big. Guys today use a ton of volume. Guys like, Jay Cutler did. Phil Heath used a lot of volume. I've seen Big Ramy train. He seems to train with a lot of volume. Nick Walker, all these guys use a fair amount of volume. So if you are going to use more volume, you sort of have to back down the intensity a little bit. And I hear a guy like Dr. Mike Israetel talk about things like reps and reserve, and that is his way of titrating intensity. So holding a rep or two back from failure is a way that you can push the volume up a little bit higher or even higher and be able to train more frequently. So a lot of times guys will split that volume up between multiple workouts So in something like a RP style program, something similar to what I do, where I train everything twice per week, I'm splitting my volume up between two different workouts. Everybody has a minimum effective volume. Everybody has a maximum recoverable volume. Dr. Mike Israeltel talks about it in his stuff. If you want to go check out his Renaissance Periodization channel, you can go over there and see him talk more in depth about it, probably more intelligently than I am. But you have to determine what is the minimum effective volume for growth given a certain amount of intensity and what the maximum recoverable volume is. And the way I structure my training is I start off at a lower volume, and I use volume as a way of modulating stimulus. So for example, we talk about progressive overload. Progressive overload can be increasing the weights. That is one way of creating progressive overload. Another way of creating progressive overload would be to move your volume up. So I will take a given weight and I will progress the volume up on that weight from my minimum effective volume to my maximum recoverable volume over a 5 or a 6 week block. I have determined that for me, something like 8 to 10 sets per week per body part is my minimum effective volume. And I can go up to somewhere in the 20 to 25 set range, maybe a little less, a little more, depending on the body part for my maximum recoverable volume. And I can only sustain that sort of volume for like a week or two before I have to back off, give my body a break, and reset. So I will do that for a 5 to 6 week period of time. I will slowly progress my volume up with that given weight. Sometimes I'll even push the weight up again. And this is a form of progressive overload. So for example, if I'm just going to pick an arbitrary exercise. Let's say I took the hammer strength bench press and I started off with 100 pounds on it for 4 sets of 10 reps per week. And I worked my way up to 20 sets of 10 reps with 100 pounds per week over a 6 week block. I have progressed and I have created a bit of progressive overload there. So I have added more volume. I've added more time under tension to that body part to stimulate hypertrophy. In the next block, I may push that weight up. I may go to 110 and then progress the volume up again. It's just an example. I'm using an arbitrary example. I would use multiple exercises. I wouldn't do it with just one exercise. So you sort of have to figure out what your maximum recoverable volume is in your minimum effective volume. And that changes based on age, based on training experience. So if you're a bigger guy, you have bigger muscles, you're handling more weight, you need less volume more than likely to create the sort of stimulus that that is necessary for a younger lifter. So if I'm handling 400 pounds for 10 reps and you're handling 100 pounds for 10 reps, I probably don't need as many sets as you do to create the sort of stimulus necessary for growth. So you have to factor that in as well as you progress, as you get. Age plays a role into it too. PEDs plays a role into it too. So if you're taking PEDs, that is going to increase your ability to recover, and you are probably going to be able to use more volume, maybe have less reps and reserves. Now, here's my problem with the whole reps and reserve thing. I don't know how you quantify it. I see a lot of the modern studies, and I am a science nerd, I am a muscle nerd, and I like a lot of the new information, the studies on training, stuff like Brad Schoenfeld and Dr. Mike Israeltel have out. But how do you actually quantify reps in reserve? I watch people train in the gym, and what is 1 rep in reserve for me, or 2 reps in reserve for me, is probably failure for most people. So I don't know how you quantify it. I can eke out more than some other guys do. And anybody who's done a leg press, you always have 1 or 2 more reps than you think you do. So I don't know how you quantify reps in reserve. So you just sort of have to feel it out and push yourself and track your progress in the gym and get a better feel for your body and learn how to push yourself to do more. I also believe that most people aren't at risk of overtraining, so I wouldn't let that creep into your mind either. A lot of people get freaked out and think they're overtraining, and they're really, really not overtraining. Very few people actually overtrain. So the whole reps and reserve thing, that is my one concern with it, is I don't know how you quantify it. And also a lot of these studies that I see on training aren't factoring in PEDs. They aren't done on people that are using PEDs. So that changes the entire formula up. You can probably handle more volume. You can probably handle more intensity. That really skews things. A lot of these, I think, in fact, all these studies that I've seen have been done on natural trainers. So that does seem to skew things. Now, with that said, it does seem that higher volume training is more effective for hypertrophy. Now, that's not to say you can't be a lower volume trainer and be successful. Certainly Dorian Yates proved that true, but he is an outlier when you think about it. How many people have actually trained like Dorian Yates and been on the Olympia stage? It's been very few. And I think that is because very few people had the sort of mental fortitude that Dorian did to train with the sort of intensity and sort of intention that he did over a sustained period of time. I also think as you push closer to the edge, as you get to failure and beyond failure, you also exponentially increase your risk of injury, especially when it comes to big, heavy compound movements. And when you're, 175 pounds and you're only moving around a couple hundred pounds, it's not really that big of a risk. But as you get bigger, if you're a big-ass bodybuilder who's bench pressing 405 on the incline bench and you're doing forced reps and all these extra intensifiers, you're probably taking a big risk that somebody who's moving 185 pounds is not. So that is also something to consider as well. Anyway, those are sort of my high-level thoughts on volume. You can train with high volume. You can train with low volume. You can do it both ways, but you have to be able to generate the sort of intensity necessary, Dorian Yates style, if you want to do low volume. And my experience has been that not many people can do that. There are very few out there that can. It can be done both ways. It's been proven that it can be done both ways. But I find that higher volume training tends to be lower risk as far as long-term injury goes, as far as growth goes, wear and tear on your body, using a little less weight, pushing the volume higher. That doesn't mean you're still not progressing. Progressive overload still applies. And you can also do training more frequently if you hold back just a little bit and potentially provide more stimulus. That's just what I've seen. And, I'm not saying that is the definitive way. I've done it both ways. I've trained with high intensity, low volume, and I got a lot out of it. I grew. I trained with high volume and pulled my intensity back just a little bit. I grew on that. So some of it's genetic. I find that as I've gotten older, I can't do the low volume, high intensity stuff anymore. It doesn't agree with my joints like it did when I was younger. If you're a younger guy, you can probably get away with that. All right, guys, let me know what you think about training volume and what training volume is appropriate for you and your thoughts on training volume and how it applies to bodybuilding in the comment section below. If you want to support me, please support my sponsor, First Detachment Nutrition. Quality supplements formulated by the man himself, Justin Harris. Just use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. I appreciate each and every one of you watching my channel. Rock on. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.